Hope everyone is having a great time and learning a lot. We've got a really interesting presentation coming up now. I spoke to our special guest, Jared Orem of Orem Farms last night. I'm from Seattle, I'm an urbanite, I don't know much about farming, and I think in 30 minutes I learned some stuff that blew my mind. So I really hope you enjoy this presentation, how regenerative agriculture fits in with the Bitcoin ethos. So welcome on stage. We have Jared Orem, our special guest of Orem Farms, with Marty Bent and Parker Lewis.
All right. I've been told I need to project, so let me know if you can hear me. Bit different, a bit of a different topic for today, Bitcoin focus, but we've talked a lot about counterparty risk in Bitcoin, and what you'll find is that once Bitcoiners find counterparty risk in the financial system, they're like, all right, where else does this exist in other areas of my life? And for some reason or another, food has been one of those sectors that Bitcoiners have focused in on, and that's why we're here to talk with Jared Orem from Orem Farms and Parker Lewis, who's standing in for David Bubaker, who had a child earlier this week, so has more important things to tend to. But I think really to jump off with this conversation, Jared, starting with you, somebody who's farming and ranching, how would you describe the counterparty risk that exists in the agricultural sector that people may not be aware of?
Sure. I mean, there's a huge food shortage. And it's been a slow roll up to where now I would deem it to be a runaway freight train. And it's going to affect not only the underprivileged, but the privileged as well. So my farm has been, I'm a fourth generation farmer, for those of you who don't know me. I've been blessed to have gotten into the industry, into the beef industry specifically, back in 2010. My grandfather retired, and I was able to take over the business with my father and my wife. And we thought we'd start off small. My grandfather had done it clear back into the 50s, but just 4 or 5 cows, just to see what would happen, see if there was a business out there. I kind of was looking to get into farming under my own umbrella, without a better term. But we raised up 5 cows, I think it was. I put an ad online, and it was within minutes I had 50 calls. It was unbelievable. And to the point where my father, who had been very much anti getting into this industry after my grandfather retired, he said, let's do that again. So we since took off. Now we service roughly 1,500 customers a year. We do deliveries, we do farmers markets, both in small amounts to I have a lot of older customers, as well as a lot of younger customers who've approached me that they're concerned that the food supply is sketchy at best, with the big companies getting involved and creating a lot of very unhealthy meats.
So what about the nature of these large food manufacturers, as you described them to me earlier, is creating the conditions that are leading to this supply shortage?
Yeah, I read a report yesterday where it said that currently the big four, big three, big four, whatever you want to call them, the Krogers, the Costcos, they control 60% of the food supply. 1 out of every $3 right now that's spent on groceries is spent in Kroger. That's a problem. A lot of unhealthy and unmanageable practices are being used that are going to create not only a lot of health issues for the customers, but a lot of unnecessary deaths. So it's a nasty business when you really get into the weeds of it. That's where the Beef Initiative come in, and I really support what they do, and I found it on a whim on a podcast, and I thought, let's just try this out. Let's just see if I can put my name on there. And still, it's been 3 years since I put my name on there. I'm still the only one in Indiana listed. I don't know why, but I get calls from all over Indiana, people wanting to buy beef that are concerned about their food supply, just based, especially in COVID, that really brought out a lot of ugly situations. So,
Parker, we're pretty tightly connected with the Beef Initiative. For people who maybe unaware of what it is and what it's trying to accomplish, could you give a 30,000-foot view?
Yeah, how many of you guys are familiar with the Beef Initiative? Okay, so maybe like 30, 40%. So I'll speak as a consumer, someone who's very close with the guys who started the Beef Initiative, to talk a little bit about, from my perspective, what it is. But I think it was would have been a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, that we met this guy named Texas Slim. Texas Slim is, I think he describes himself as a hippie cowboy. He's from Amarillo, Texas, grew up in a ranching family, but that since passed, and he has it in his roots, but basically recognized that there was a problem with the food system and set off to learn more about what that was, and went to work for one of the large, I think, food companies. And one of the ways he described it to me was, and I can kind of describe it back of what I heard, was that there's been a massive centralization of the food supply chain, and that restricts, or they use that centralization to dictate to farmers and ranchers what they can and can't do with their cattle, that has negative consequences downstream. And what I heard back, or kind of I see it in a lot of different places, looking from the lens of Bitcoin, that when they centralize the money supply abroad, like basically virtually every industry centralizes a function of the money supply centralizing, and one of them was the food industry, and particularly the cattle industry. And that what the Beef Initiative is about is decentralizing the food supply, and what Slim would say is the reason of this connection between Bitcoin and the Beef Initiative was really one of a culture, an ethos, but realistically trying to find the people that were most susceptible or most likely to changing their consumption model or their consumption behavior. Basically, if you're willing to be one of those people who is going to question the money, that you're more likely, if you're one of those people, to then question the problems in the food industry, the food supply, and then be likely to change your consumption model from going to the grocery store for your beef to going directly to the rancher. And Texas Slim was the one who really started to popularize this meme that is shake your rancher's hand. And it goes a step further than just going to the farmer's market and buying food from that person. It's introducing yourself to that person, seeking out a rancher like Jared, getting to know them, developing a relationship with them. And I can tell you from my perspective, it's how many of you have actually met the rancher that you buy beef from? Part of this ethos is like, we're not going to eat bugs. We're going to store our wealth in a form of money that they can't print. But that when I think about it from my own selfish perspective, it is my rancher in Austin is a guy named Cole Bolton. He runs a ranch called K&C Cattle with his wife. And Marty's actually the one who introduced me to Cole and Slim. And I got a chance to help Cole understand Bitcoin better. But then I went to a talk that he gave explaining the importance of how he runs his cattle, and then hearing Slim talk about the fact that if you go to your butcher at your even a Whole Foods and ask them where that meat came from, they don't know. And that not every rancher is created equal, and they inject a lot of antibiotics in certain cattle, and if you can't trace the lineage of the beef, you don't know what you're actually eating. And for me, though, coming back to it, it's like, okay, those ideas made sense, but from a selfish perspective, it's like when COVID happened, there wasn't beef at the grocery store. There was a run on it. And again, it's not to instill fear, but to me, I look at it as a redundancy. If I can go across town and my rancher has 2,000 head of cattle and there's 2 million people in the Austin MSA, those 2,000 head of cattle aren't feeding all those people. And I get assurance that I know my rancher, and then he takes my Bitcoin as payment. And I value the relationship. I help him get to know other people who are like-minded. And so really what the Beef Initiative is about going basically from the ranch directly to the consumer and circumventing the large industrial food factories to create basically an access to market for the rancher and more truth in food and greater redundancy for the consumer.
So Jared, I think to dive deeper into the particular problem of industrial farming, industrial food production, like Parker mentioned the problem with all these companies injecting cattle with antibiotics. Number one, how bad is that for the end consumer to actually consume those products? And then number two, how does something like the Beef Initiative empower you to actually service more customers?
Sure. I was given the opportunity through my day employment, I'll put it that way, to visit a very large processor, I'll put it that way. It's a very well-known fast food restaurant. I'm sure they're everywhere. I'm sure there's one here. At the processor, we walked in. Of course, they put all the covers on and the hairnet, all that kind of thing. We walk in. Floor is just oily, nasty. Everybody was slipping and falling, including their own employees. We went to the end of the line because they were trying to show us what hazards we might come in contact with, things like that. They had a large pallet of just, at first I thought it was cardboard. Really almost burnt, wet cardboard, if you know what that looks like. When I got closer, I looked, and it was frozen meat, but it was not prime frozen meat by any means. It was probably 50% bone, 25%, I'm guessing was probably organ meat, and then probably everything else was skin and everything else thrown into it. And they were just frozen blocks that were probably 12 inches by 12 inches by 12 inches, pretty good sized block. And they would take these and they'd put them on this line, and they would send it through to a screw to grind them. And we walked around at that point, and there were 55-gallon drums of food dye on the ground, and they were injecting them directly into that thing at a pretty healthy rate. The end product was about a 4 to 6 foot long block. If you guys know what Velveeta, the blocks look like, this was pink Velveeta is what it looked like. And they were just slicing it and sending it off, to their distributors for final consumption in the fast food industry. But at that point, I was a little bit perturbed, to say the least. But the thing that really caught my eye was I looked at the box that this meat was coming out of, and I wanted to see where it was coming from. Any guesses? New Zealand. And it was nasty New Zealand, I'll put it that way. It was not prime New Zealand. But that apparently, the more I've researched, that is everywhere, and it's not getting better. There's a lot coming out of Brazil, a lot coming out of Australia, that area. Even the beef that's raised here. In 2016, there was a bill put forth that the USDA approved, which I'm still surprised they did. But at that point, they took off the label "Made in the USA" for beef and pork. Now they can sell it under the label "Product of USA." Stuff never was raised here. No animal ever breathed American air. It was all done elsewhere, brought in, packaged here, so that way they can use this label, "Product of USA." So, to answer your second question, the Beef Initiative, I really like what they're doing. They're bringing back beef into the U.S. Everybody knows exactly what they're eating. Everybody can go out and shake their farmer's hand, talk to them. I have customers that contact me on a regular basis. They want to just talk. They don't want to buy beef from me, and it's fine. I'm happy to talk to them. If they're having a rough day, I'm happy to do that. And one of my customers, I talk to him pretty frequently. Just lost his wife. He called me when he lost his wife. I wasn't that close with his wife, but I was more close to him. But that I was able to go and comfort him a little bit. He just needed somebody to talk to, and you're not going to get that if you go to Kroger. I'm sorry, it's just not how it is. But the Beef Initiative, I really like what they're doing on multiple levels of bringing back trust in food, trust in beef, trust in what you're eating, and hopefully that continues going forward.
Yeah, how do we increase the momentum here? Because obviously the problems you described are pretty scary when you think about them, and obviously Parker and I go straight to Cole in Austin, and it is a pretty incredible experience. You can go to his ranch, and he'll take you in his truck and show you the lots of cattle and how they're feeding them and explain why he doesn't inject antibiotics. And it's a really cool experience. Number one, because you see where your food is made and how it's made. Number two, you're making a connection. You really understand the proof of work that goes into cattle ranching specifically, and you gain a lot of respect for the process of bringing food to market, which in today's day and age, if we're being honest, most people are completely disconnected from the source of their seed, as Slim would put it. And so how do we, in your mind, build this momentum to make this more of a normal process for people? Instead of going to Whole Foods or Kroger, they actually take the initiative to go shake their rancher's hand and develop a relationship and get food.
Right now, the beef industry is in a period of low supply and high demand, and that demand is going to increase. With the drought that we had the last couple of years out west, a lot of farmers got out that had cow-calf operations. I'm anxious to see as the cycle has continued that a lot of those have not gotten back in. But I'd like to see, as demand increases, a lot of farmers are going to be willing to get back in if they see that they can make a profit while doing what they love and being able to feed what they love. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, is trying to make sure that, if they know that you're going to continue buying from them year after year, month after month, they're going to be a lot more interested in reinvesting their hard-earned income back into their farm systems.
Does the popularization of this direct-to-consumer model help your business out?
It does. People really like eating it, and I don't know how else to describe it, but a lot of time I've had a lot of customers that have opened up a package of beef and been like, wow, that doesn't look like what I'm getting in town. So that they really, really like that, and they said it smells different, it tastes different, the color's different. Meat is not supposed to be bright red. That's food-injected meat, if you can even call it meat. So what we get is, it looks rich, it smells good, it has a wonderful taste, low fat, and the consumer sees that day to day, and they continue to purchase from us because they know that what we're getting is what I eat personally. So,
yeah. And Parker, going back and building on what you said earlier about paying for your beef in Bitcoin when you go to KNC, and I know this is something you're very passionate about, and that's particularly why you're working at ZapRight, is enabling people to accept Bitcoin. How do you view what we're doing as Bitcoiners to educate ranchers about Bitcoin and sort of pitching them on, number one, the relationship of buying directly from them, but number two, hey, I'd like you to accept this form of money that I think will work out for you in the long run?
Yeah, so I'll steal a page. I'll say what Texas Slim would say. And the first day that I got to meet both Slim and Cole from KNC Cattle in Austin, we went to a barbecue joint, and they gave a talk about kind of why what they were working on was important, why the beef initiative was important. And then after the event, Cole had a bunch of his beef, and he was selling it for Bitcoin. And I had bought things for Bitcoin before, but that was probably the first time that I actually bought something in Bitcoin that I actually needed. Now, could I have gone down to the grocery store and bought a steak and fed myself? Yes. But it was the first time that I bought something that on a day-to-day basis, like, there's a few things that you need to survive, and it's money, food, and energy. And food is a critical one of them. And I basically took out my Bitcoin wallet. Cole opened up a Bitcoin wallet. I hit him with paid in Lightning, for those of you guys, as people have mentioned it today. But I paid the equivalent of a very small fraction of a penny for 2 New York strips. And it was like, I had already gotten Bitcoin. The message was resonating, but I connected that was security. And that I think that, just as Bitcoin is hard to understand, and for those of you guys who are just early on your journey, recognize that it's a rabbit hole, and seeing Bitcoin is challenging. It's certainly worth it for those that are self-motivated. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Similarly, once you figure out that, just as the financial system is fragile, the food system is fragile. The food system is fragile for the same reason that the financial system is fragile, centralization. And for me, it was that point to point. There was no financial institution between us, between me and my rancher, and that one of the biggest challenges, and I think the way that we accelerate it, what Slim would say is, don't go walking in, for you Bitcoiners out there that already get it, don't go find your rancher and start telling them why Bitcoin is the best thing since sliced bread. Ask to be educated. Ask someone like Jared about their business, about why what they do is important. Focus on the relationship, and then you can help somebody, kind of earn trust, and then you can help somebody earn why Bitcoin is important to them, because it is. It's important to a rancher for the same reason that's important to an individual or any business, that it's storing wealth for them. And if you're trading your money for, or your time and your value, your proof of work, which for someone like Jared, it's his cattle. If you're trading that for a form of money that's degrading and creating a deficit, you're constantly running on a treadmill that's working against you. And it's the same for a rancher as it is for any business. But that the way that we accelerate it is going and asking to be educated. But it's also, and I speak for my own sake, I have a rancher in Austin that sells beef for Bitcoin. It's hard to change your consumption model. I probably still only purchase somewhere between 30 and 50% of the beef that I buy, rather than, and it's like, it's not all gonna happen at once, but it's focusing on not being complacent, just as it is helping people understand Bitcoin, you yourself, and saying, okay, it's easy to go to the grocery store, but that might be a source of risk for me, and it might be greater than I actually ascribe to it. So how do you accelerate yourself? You change your consumption model, you recognize that it's important, and that you ask to be educated, and then thereafter you can help a rancher understand why the Bitcoin side of it's important. But in this side of the equation, you actually need what they have, maybe more so than the reverse.
And really digging into the centralization risk of ranching, particularly, I think there's a meme around regenerative farming specifically that it's really not scalable. Like, we need these large processing facilities in the big four to do everything for us, to feed everybody. But I think Cole, his ranch, KNC in Austin, it's literally right next to the Austin airport, and he's got like a cement recycling operation on his property. I think that's a great example of, you can do a lot with little. Obviously, White Oak Pastures in Georgia has really proven that you can do. In your experience, Jared, like, how do you view regenerative farming and using that as a mechanism to distribute beef production specifically?
Sure. It's a simple process, really. I didn't want my children growing up around all the chemicals that are out there today, the Roundups, the atrazine, the long-term exposure to that stuff cannot be good. So when we decided to make the transition over to regenerative farming, the first thing we did, cover crops. We spent 3 years getting an organic certification on some of our ground. We feed our cows on the ground. Guess what? They use the restroom. That fertilizes my ground for the next year's crop. I've noticed that the cattle, for some reason, I don't know if it's the lack of chemicals or what it is that's around, they're much more relaxed. We try to keep them very quiet, relaxed. We go out there to the fence lines often to just pet them. They know us, they trust me. If one of them happens to get out due to a coyote or something around, spooks one, it comes to the house. I mean, I'll look out the back door and, hey, look, there's a cow. And then I just open a gate and it walks back in. But for the regenerative farming, it is more than possible, even at scale. So for me, just being a small farmer, there's very few around that do it, because it's much easier for a lot of guys to spray Roundup. But then what's next after Roundup? I mean, you got basically DDTs are out there now. They're remarketed, but that's essentially what they are. Well, now we have Roundup resistant weeds. So, all those things are really, really hurting the regenerative movement. But over a period of time, as you start the cover crops, the rotational grazing, things like that, new wildlife pops up. I see more butterflies around. I see more birds coming to my area. All those things are really helping regrow the land the way that it was supposed to be grown, 100 years ago. So I really like what I've seen. I wish we could get more government help to promote healthy farming, but it's a challenge because there's so many people with their hands out trying to get a quick buck based on Roundup and glyphosate and other things like that. So,
Yeah, it's really just disheartening like that. But it's interesting because, again, going back to the beginning of this panel, where I said when you find Bitcoin, you see it, you're like, holy crap, the financial system's completely borked. It's like, how could it get this bad, and how could I not understand that it was this bad? I was just a fish swimming in water, if you will, until I discovered this truth that I can't unsee, like Parker said. Like, what do you think people, let's just be frank, America is woefully obese. Our life expectancy rate is falling right now. And a lot of this is being driven by the food industry, just making us extremely unhealthy. And then on top of that, forcing us into a healthcare system, which is injecting us with other stuff. So like what do you think the American consumer at the end of the day, like what is going to make them have a light switch go off that has them internalized, this is something I need to really focus on?
right now, I listened to a podcast on the way down here. They were talking about the autism rate. Currently, it's 1 in 37 kids have autism. In the 80s, it was 1 in 3,000 or 4,000, whatever the number is. Far more than what it is now. 1 in 22 males have it that are being born now. There's 76 shots that are being mandated from birth all the way up. My sister's autistic, so I can speak freely to this. They found out when she was 13, after 10 or 12 years of her not speaking, very little, she was not restroom trained, very little learning going on in her life. She was on about a 2 to 3 year old level. They found out she had 70 times the amount of aluminum and magnesium in her body that normal people have. I say normal people loosely. She went through a detox program instantly. She started learning, growing. Now she works 2 jobs. She's 34 years old, works 2 jobs, has a boyfriend, pays for her own things. She still lives with my parents, but she's basically completely self-sufficient. So, and the rates of autism went up from 86 to 89 when the Reagan administration basically took away the ability for all these drug companies to be sued for the shots that they were giving people. So it's a challenging thing. My children have had no shots. I wanted to have them tested to see what likelihood they had of becoming autistic if they had those high levels of magnesium and aluminum. My daughter came back, she would have been 98, she was 98% likely to have autism. My son was like 94. I was the worst in the family, somehow I avoided it. But it's a disheartening thought, but we're not completely switched over yet where everything is controlled. So I'm looking, there's a homesteading movement that's going on right now, I think is going to have a lot of things. COVID actually did some good things for a lot of people. People started reading what they were being injected with. They started reading what was in their food. They started learning about the supply chain and learning about how fragile it really was. So that is a very good thing. That COVID really expanded my business, and I know it started a lot more that are around us. There's probably 3 or 4 farmers around us that now are raising beef. Just based on what they saw, they saw the fear in people. I'm sure they had the fear in their own houses that they wanted to secure their own food and offer that food also to the local municipalities around.
To that point too, I mean, I think the good food, I think we could dive into like the nutrient-dense food that you're producing and how that can be used as a preventative vehicle to make it so you don't get unhealthy in the first place, then you don't have all these overburdensome healthcare costs in the back end of your life.
Absolutely. The guys at work that I work with, I'm actually a fireman by trade. Being a farmer is my off-day job. The other firemen that I deal with, they call me all the time. Hey, can you bring in beef tomorrow? And I give it to them. You know, I'm happy to help out. But they're like, we can't get this at the store. And several of them didn't even know that there were food dyes in what they got from the store. So that was a challenging conversation that I had to have with them. I'm like, look, because they would put it side by side in two cast iron skillets, and one had, less than 10% fat. The other one was 30 plus, and it looked awful when it was done. It tasted different. It tasted almost like it was spoiled. So there is a movement coming it's been in the works since 2020, 2021, somewhere in that area. It's alive, it's growing. I'm excited for it. So there by no means is all hope lost.
Are you optimistic, Parker?
Yeah, I mean, I'm optimistic because, I think there's a saying in Bitcoin that Bitcoin changes you more than you can change Bitcoin. The reason why Bitcoin is valuable is because of its fixed supply, and that, again, once you see through, as Texas Slim would say in the beef initiative, the lies and deception of the big food industry, same thing exists in the financial system, but once you see through that, you start to see other things a lot more clearly. There's a website called WTF, happened in 1971. Many of you are probably familiar with it, but I'm not a rancher, I'm not a doctor, but you can see this, they changed the food pyramid in 1971, and the beef consumption per person came down, and then cardiovascular disease and diabetes run rampant. It's like there's a common sense problem here, and that when you start to attach it to the money supply, it's also very common sense. It's like, I go to the grocery store, and this is a Whole Foods in Austin. Pre-last episode of money printing, the ribeye, which some people could say ribeye is a privilege, but just use it as a benchmark. A ribeye is a ribeye is a ribeye. $13.99 a pound. Same exact store 3 years later, $25.99 a pound. What do people do when their dollar gets debased? They have to substitute. So in the context of a lot of people, they might substitute to something that's still pretty good for themselves, like ground beef, because they can't afford the ribeye anymore. But then you keep going down the savings spectrum. Assume the person can't, a pound of ground beef costs 33% more today, national average, than 3 years ago, that person starts substituting to some processed food, and it's a very common sense thing to attach the debasement of your money, the reduction of your purchasing power, to substitution to lower and lower quality goods, and the same applies to your food. And your food is literally the building block of your muscles, everything about you. So if you're putting lower quality fuel in your system, you're going to get a lower quality outcome for your health. It's like, I'm not a doctor, I'm just a common sense person that's looking at the incentive mechanism. And so it is all related to each other, but Bitcoin is this great source of hope, and it doesn't fix all problems. It's just a tool. Money is just a tool to allow you to facilitate trade, but we're not fighting our way through this. We have to trade our way through it, and that it is a tool of empowerment, but that it is, once you see that this tool is there for you to use and that it empowers you, it empowers a lot more than just money and a financial asset. It empowers you to change a lot more about your life. And it does create this great source of optimism. Like for me, and this is just speaking personally for myself, I started, as I mentioned this morning, that the dollar was broken, and if I didn't figure out a solution, it would be very easy to be pessimistic about the future. Imagine you just see a broken world and you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's a lot harder to get up in the morning, put one foot in front of the other, but there is a solution out there. It fixes a lot more than just money, but the broken money system has broken a lot of the incentive structures. It applies to health. It starts with the food. Slim talks about the beef initiative being, the beef initiative is the great American health initiative. That's what he'll say. And I think that's counterintuitive to a lot of people, but if they start with common sense and they start at the grocery store and they start to realize that they have been probably having to substitute because their income's not going up as fast as their grocery bills are going up, and then you start to apply it to somebody that's not as well off as you are, and they're experiencing it and they're getting squeezed harder, and you have the benefit of being in this room, and a lot of people, are in a lot worse positions. They're substituting far worse from something that's ribeye to ground beef. They're going from, ground beef to some processed thing that could sit on your shelf for 5 years, and that's probably not good for you.
Yeah. I guess before we wrap up here, Jared, what are some actionable things people in the crowd can do to support the ranchers in their local areas?
Sure. Go outside of town, look around, knock on some doors. There are farmers everywhere who are happy to talk to you, happy to sell you beef, sell you pork, sell you whatever. I try to have a good link of local farmers in my area. If I don't have any beef coming, ready at that point, I forward them on to some friends of mine who do. So farmers have links. Everybody's connected now with our phones and the internet, email, whatever it is. We are happy to sell you our beef, but we are also happy to get to know you, and we want to. To me, if I'm just selling a person beef, I don't talk to them. I'm angry because I want to know about your life. I want to know, that's the first thing I ask. Tell me about yourself. Tell me why you chose me to why you chose to reach out to me. And a lot of times our stories online, people love the story, and that's usually a good way to get the foot in the door. But spend some time, research, find out how farmers raise stuff, find out what they're raising. Look at the cow, look at the pig, look at the whatever animal it is that you're interested in. Make sure that you can see that animal has been raised in a healthy, happy, relaxed environment. That's just going to improve the quality of what you're eating and improve your long-term health.
Awesome. All right, that's all the time we have. Jared, Parker, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
It's a big round of applause for Jared, Orem, Parker Lewis, and Marty Bent. Thanks, guys.